Hi, welcome back to Fantasy Football Profits. Thanks for joining me today. This is our Week 6 start sit video. Now, before we get into anything, if you're new joining us, we always say this in our videos that you need to contextualize this information. What I mean by that is we're going to give you ideas on players where their value's at, if you start them, sit them, things like that. But every league is different. Scoring system is different. Availability is different. Waiver wire, things like that, etc. So you need to take this information and flex into your league. The other thing that we try to do on our start sit videos is answer any questions you may have at the bottom. If you put a question down there, we'll try to get you in a timely manner and explain our justification for why we think you should start a guy, sit a guy, etc. But the one thing that it's getting harder and harder to do is we have more and more questions. I think last week we had over 500 different questions. So we'll try to get to your question. If we miss it, I'm really sorry. We do give preference to our Patreon supporters. So if you're a Patreon supporter, we'll go ahead and send our message on Patreon. But once again, I think we've done a pretty good job through the last 2 years of getting to everybody's questions out there. Last thing I want to cover before we get into the video is we are now partnershiping with a place called Thrive Fantasy. They have a daily app out there. It's Daily Fantasy. It's something if you've never played before, I'd encourage you to try Daily Fantasy. It's fun, it's easy, and they're taking a whole different take on it. But I can't even begin to explain it to you. You've got to check it out for yourself. Click on the link below and give it a shot. Let's get to our first game. So we're looking at the Giants versus the Eagles. Now, if I don't mention a guy in the video here, we try to mention as many guys as we can, but if I don't mention a guy, you can safely assume you need to sit him. Then the other thing that we tell you is there's always going to be anomalies. Every week, you're going to do the best you can to make solid decisions based on facts, information, not hunches, feelings like that. But no matter how well you do your research, you're going to make a mistake. I think last week I ended up losing a game because of a start-sit decision. I ended up 6-3 on the week. This week I went 9-0. But you're going to lose games. It's going to happen. But I think if you make solid decisions time and time again, in the end, you'll win more of your games than not, and you're going to be there in the playoff time and hopefully make it to the championship. So let's get to our quarterbacks. Let's talk about Eli Manning. Right now, that team is kind of a mess. There's a lot of issues going on there, although the offense finally scored. I think it was the first time they broke 30 points going all the way back to 2015. Now, if you look at Philadelphia's defense has talent there. They've struggled a little bit, although this year they have shut down some good quarterbacks. They slowed down Andrew Luck and Matt Ryan. Now, if you look at Eli, he's had 2 good games, but he's also had some very disappointing games against some below-average defenses. I think you could start him in deeper leagues, but for me, he's outside the top 15 quarterback rankings. In fact, for me, he lands somewhere in between the 28 to 25 range, depending upon your scoring system. He's so inconsistent that I think it's better if you look elsewhere, but if you had to, you could start him in deeper leagues. As far as Carson Wentz goes, he's had back-to-back games where he's had over 300 yards passing. Now, Minnesota defense had struggled before last week, but I think it's important to remember that last year, that defense was number one defense in the NFL. And so the fact that Carson Wentz was able to go out there and throw for 300 yards is, I think, a pretty successful day for him. I would start Carson Wentz in this game. That Giants defense is underrated, but they're not nearly as good as the Vikings defense. Now, they did lose Jay Ajayi in this. Now, that may hurt the running game a little bit, but I think they're going to be fine. Corey Clement is back now, and Corey Clement has got very good hands. He's way more versatile running back than Jay Ajayi, so I think that's going to be fine for Carson Wentz in the passing game there. As far as running backs go there, Saquon Barkley, he's a no-brainer start as a running back 1. This guy is really good. Now, Jay Ajayi is gone. I think a lot of people are going to expect that Smallwood's going to become the guy there. I think he's the one that's going to be the preferred waiver wire claim this week. But when it's all said and done, we did some videos about Clement last season before the season started, even leading up to this season. If he can stay healthy, I think Clement's going to be the go-to guy in that offense, with Smallwood still being the guy that's going to relieve him from time to time. Now, you look at last game, Clement was active. I know a lot of people are wondering, well, if he's active, how come he didn't get carries? Well, he was just coming off a hamstring injury, and I know that Philadelphia has a short week this week, playing on Thursday. So you had Jay Ajayi, and then you had Smallwood. I'm assuming that they just didn't want to risk re-aggravating his hamstring in that game. Now, if you look at before this year, Smallwood had really struggled to run the ball before this season. He had a 3.9 yards per carry. There's only 3 times in 2 years he had double-digit carries. Clement is a considerably bigger back, and so I think he's going to get a majority of carries there. In fact, if you look at Clement last playoff year going into this year, he's a guy that has really been very successful in the passing. I think that bodes well for him. Now, I think he can move into becoming an every week RB2, but instead we see the workload exactly how those carries are going to be distributed, touch are going to be distributed. For me, this week, Clement is a running back 2/3. I would play him in a flex position. What I'm going to do is later in the week, come Friday, so I just really watch Coach Peterson's comments on that running back position, just try to get an idea of like kind of where he's landing in terms of distribution goes there. Smallwood's a guy that I would probably lean towards sitting or playing in a flex play in deeper leagues. As far as wide receivers go, Odell Beckham. Philadelphia is struggling against opposing receivers. They're getting the 4th most points to wide receivers. Odell Beckham is a wide receiver 1 start this week. Sterling Shepard, 24 targets in 3 games, over 75 yards receiving last 3 games and 2 touchdowns. He's a solid wide receiver 3, especially if Evan Ingram misses more time, which I think that he probably is going to. As far as all the Giants go, that Giants team is kind of a mess. Their defense is not bad, actually, and they actually hold receivers in check. And so that, I think, is going to pose some issues for Nelson Aguilar and some of those guys in terms of starts go. Nelson Aguilar, he's had a lot of targets this year, but the production simply is not there. I'd sit Nelson Aguilar. Now, Alshon Jeffrey, now we advised last week sitting after he had a good week 1. I think we need to remember that if you forget the Rams game, let's just throw that anomaly out there. You look at Xavier Rhodes. Xavier Rhodes is a shutdown corner. I think that Alshon Jeffrey rebounds this week. I think you need to start him as a wide receiver 3. Last year against the Giants, he had moderate success. As far as tight ends go, got Evan Ingram. Coach says there's a shot he could play Thursday night. I don't see it. I have a feeling he's going to miss one more week. Why risk that for the rest of your year? Watch the injury report. If he does play, he's a low-end tight end 1. Remember, he had a really good game just before injuring himself. He had 6 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown. He's got legit skills. I would sit Ellison regardless of what Evan Ingram does. I would sit him. Zach Ertz, you need to start Zach Ertz. Right now, he's actually a better play than Gronkowski. He's averaging over 11 targets per game for the year. Last 4 games, he's averaged over 97 yards receiving. And with Carson Wentz back, he's actually having 111 yards last 2 games. He's really Carson Wentz's favorite target out there. So Zach Ertz is a guy that you need to start. As far as Dallas Goedert, the other tight end goes, he's talented, but he's young. He's just not there yet, so I would sit him. I would start both kickers, Roses and Elliott, in there. Before the season, we actually talked about how Roses had rebounded. Look, he's got a strong leg. He's solid there. I would sit the Giants defense. You could start the Philly defense, who's got a lot of talent on paper, but right now isn't playing particularly great. But if you, it's a very low end play. If you're desperate, you could start with them. Look at the Buccaneers and the Falcons right there. Start with Jameis Winston. I love Jameis Winston moving forward. I mean, I love him as a quarterback, but I love him as a fantasy quarterback there. Now, he's playing in Atlanta. That defense has lost a lot of key defenders there. Last 3 games without those players, when they've been hurt, they're allowing 40.3 points per game. They give the 4th most points to quarterbacks. Now, last season when the Falcons played defense well, last year they're playing quite a bit better than they are now. When Winston faced him, he went on through for 299 yards and 3 touchdown passes. I think he could have much bigger numbers in that game this week. This is a great situation for Winston, and not just in this game, but moving forward. One, Tampa Bay's got a bad defense. They allow a lot of points. That forces him to throw a lot. In fact, him throwing the ball 40 to 45 times a game is not a stretch by any means. So I think that he's a huge play moving forward there. He's got great weapons around him. You've got Evans, Jackson, an underrated Godwin, Brait, and then Howard will be back soon. So I really love him, not only in this game, but moving forward. Matt Ryan, another great start in this game. 9 touchdown passes the last 3 games, averaging 359 passing yards per game during that stretch, facing a Tampa Bay defense that gives up the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. There should be a lot of points scored in this one. As far as running backs go, you got Barber and Ronald Jones. Now, they're facing Atlanta, who give up the 4th most points to running backs. This should be a great play for one of those guys there, but I really have to advise sitting both of them. Barber has been bad all year, 3.0 yards per carry, and Ronald Jones struggled in the preseason. Now, I think that he's going to be given an opportunity to win that job there. They're going to give him a shot. One, he's a rookie, 2nd-round pick, so they're going to see what he can do. But in the preseason, he actually had a 0.78 yards per carry. He was terribly bad. Now, last game, he got activated. He played at 10 carries for 29 yards. So I think he'll give an opportunity there. I wouldn't be surprised when it's all said and done if Jacquez Rodgers ends up being the running back moving forward. So in this game, we just don't know what that's going to look like. None of these backs have looked good. Sit them all. Devontae Freeman came back last game. First came back, he didn't have a big day. He didn't re-injure himself. He actually looked explosive, looked fine out there. So I think this week they're going to increase his touches and his production is going to go up against a Tampa Bay defense that allows the 6th most points to running backs. You need to start him. As far as Tevin Coleman's go, this is the 4th consecutive season that his yards per carries have dropped. He only has value when Freeman is out or injured. So you need to sit him, and I would also sit Ito Smith. As far as wide receivers go, you got Mike Evans in this one. You need to start as a wide receiver 1 stud. Atlanta gives up the 8th most points to wide receivers. And then there's Deshaun Jackson. Now, in 3 or 4 games, Deshaun Jackson's had over 100 yards of receiving. So I think you need to consider him a wide receiver 3 in this matchup, but I want to caution you there. His targets haven't been great to this point right now, and he's really actually overproduced. He right now currently has a career best 25 yards per catch. That's likely going to drop, meaning that he's going to have to see an increase in targets to maintain production and keep him a relevant wide receiver 3. In the meantime, though, you do need to start him. I think another thing that hurts him is Godwin. Godwin is a wide receiver who's very talented. Coaches love him last year. They love him in the preseason. And right now, Godwin and Jackson devalue each other. One of those guys getting hurt would really up the value of the other one. But start Jackson as a wide receiver 3 in this one. Chris Godwin, I would start as a wide receiver 3 if you're in larger leagues. When I say larger leagues, we're talking about 12 teams or larger than that. He's had 3 TDs in 4 games after the coaches raved about him all preseason. He could be a wide receiver 2 or 3 every week if it wasn't for Jackson, who's playing so well right now. Mohamed Sanu in this one versus Tampa Bay. Now, 3 weeks in a row, Sanu has had good games. But I think one of the things that keeps his ceiling lower is you got Calvin there, you got Julio Jones there, so those targets get spread out quite a bit. During that same stretch, though, as they've lost some key defenders and that defense has struggled, they've had to throw the ball a lot more. Sanu's targets have increased during that stretch, so I think that those targets he's the last 3 games are going to be probably more indicative of what we're going to see moving forward. That makes him a wide receiver 3 start this week. Calvin Ridley, after having 6 touchdowns in 3 games, he finally got held out of the end zone. But he's a solid wide receiver, got a lot of talent in a game that should be high scoring. I think that you need to start him as a wide receiver 3 play this week there. As far as Julio Jones go, start as a wide receiver 1. That's kind of a no-brainer. For some reason, this guy has a hard time finding the end zone, but I think this week actually finds pay dirt. So last year, when Julio Jones played the Buccaneers, he went off for 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's the type of ceiling that this guy has, so you need to start Julio Jones. Austin Hooper in this game. Now, last week, he had a great matchup. We suggested that you start him. He responded with 9 catches, 77 yards. Now he plays Tampa Bay, who allows the second most points to tight ends. I would start Hooper. To me, he lands in that kind of tight end 10 to 12 range there. Cameron Brate in this one. Okay, so Howard currently is out with an injury. Sounds like he's going to be out at least a couple more weeks. You look at Cameron Brate, very good. You look at the last 2 years, he had 14 total touchdowns. Last 2 weeks, he's had 2 touchdowns this season. I think he's a nice play with Howard out there. You need to start him. I would start Bryant, and I would start Cazaro in this game, and I would sit both defenses. Both defenses are bad, so that's kind of what I would do with this game. The Bengals versus the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger. So we advertised him before the season. We said this guy is really good. I think we had him ranked like 6 or 7, I think, in our rankings. But at one point in the preseason, he was going number 14 in mock drafts, way, way too low. Currently, he's number 8 among all quarterback starters, averaging about 23 points per game. Now he's playing Cincinnati, who gives up the 6th most points to quarterbacks. I think this is a great play for Ben. Start him. Andy Dalton's playing the Steelers, who give the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. He's having a good season right now. He's rebounding a little bit there. For me, he's a quarterback 10 to 12 in that range as far as the rankings go. In a game that will most likely be a shutout. So I would, a shootout. So I would start Andy Dalton. So as running backs go, you got Joe Mixon. Compared to last year, his yards per carry 3.5. This year is 4.5. It's a whole yard per carry better. That's great. He's looked really good this year. Now, this Pittsburgh defense is bad. If they have one area where they do fairly well, it's actually against opposing running backs. They allow the 7th fewest points to running backs. Now, much of that is due to the fact they haven't faced a ton of good running backs up to this point. But even if they happen to slow Mixon down in this game, it doesn't matter. He's so active in the passing game. I think he's due for a heavy workload. Start as low-end running back 1 in this one. And then there's James Conner. After 3 disappointing games, we said last week he's going to rebound. He did that in a big way. Now, the coaches also said last week that they need to get him involved more in the game early, and they did that also. So he's playing Cincinnati. He's up to 12th most points to running backs. Most likely, he's not going to put up quite the yardage numbers that he did last week this week. But I think he's going to have another game where he'll exceed 100 total yards and probably get a touchdown. Start as a high-end running back, too. Wide receivers in this game. Juju Smith-Schuster starts as a wide receiver 2. The Bengals allow the 7th most points to wide receivers. Now, last week he's had a drop in targets. Last 2 weeks he's seen a drop in yards, although he did get a touchdown last week. But I think part of the reason why he had lower targets last week is that was a blowout game there. You need to start him. He's very talented. Then Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is Antonio Brown. He's a wide receiver 1. Start him. A.J. Green finally had over 100 yards last week. He's very good. He's a wide receiver 1 start also. You don't even think about that. Just start him. Yeah, Tyler Boyd. So after 3 solid weeks, had a little bit of a drop-off, but that's going to happen to even the best receivers unless you're Adam Thielen, who apparently that doesn't matter who he plays. He's just going to get you 100 yards. So I think this is a week. Tyler Boyd's going to rebound, have a nice game. Start as a wide receiver 2/3, depending on your league size. So Tyler Eifert, ugly leg injury there. He's out for the year. That left Croft, who's the other tight end. So between the 2 tight ends, they had 3 targets. Now they're playing Pittsburgh, who gives up the most points to tight ends. It seems like it's a great matchup there, but who do you go with? Well, I don't think it's Croft. I think the other tight end's probably going to get majority of the targets there. I think he's the one, if you're going to trust one, you could trust him. With that said, I don't trust either one of them, so I'd probably try to avoid that at this point. Now, as far as tight ends go for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got Jesse James, Vance McDonald. We said Vance McDonald's going to run hot or cold. He's going to have an occasional big game. Now he plays Cincinnati, gives the 5th most points to tight ends. Sit Jesse James. Now Vance is the guy to play. But don't expect his week 3 performance he had earlier this year where he had over 100 yards. I think he's a guy that could get you probably 4 catches, 65 yards, somewhere in that range in this one. Start Boswell and Bullock in this one. Sit both. Now, if you had to start a defense in this one, it'd be, for me, the Steelers. They're getting the quarterback fairly well. They're putting pressure on, even though they're allowing a lot of points. They got 19 sacks in 5 games. And then remember last year they actually led the NFL in sacks. So if you had to go with the defense, start the Steelers, although I would advise not even doing that. So look at the Chargers versus the Browns. Philip Rivers, currently in the year, he's got 13 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions. He's having over 300 passing yards per game. You need to start this guy. The one thing I will say, though, is that I think that maybe it looks like a better matchup than it actually is. I think Rivers has a good play this weekend, but they're playing the Browns at home, and that Browns defense is underrated. They're actually allowing the 10th fewest points to quarterback, so you can start Rivers, but temper your expectations. I think a day of 250 yards and 2 touchdowns is reasonable for him. And there's Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield looks all the part of a first-round pick. He broke 300 yards last game. He's poised. He's made some nice throws, but he's still a rookie. Okay, he's still a rookie, so I think we need to be careful there. The Chargers defense has had 6 interceptions in 4 games. They slowed Derek Carr down. The defense, though, isn't quite the same without Joey Bosa there. For me, you look at the Baker Mayfield, he's outside the top 15. I have him about the 16 to 18 range this week based on your scoring system. As far as running backs go in this one, you have Melvin Gordon, started as a running back 1. Currently, he's 3rd in points as far as running backs go. This guy's doing it all. He's run the ball well. He's catching the ball in the backfield. He's finding the pay dirt. So this is a guy that you need to play as a running back 1. Then there's Austin Eckler. So Austin Eckler has been productive. The team is getting him involved. They're keeping him involved. He's a very talented young man there. I would start as a running back 3 or a flex play in leagues that are 12 teams or larger. Once again, I said they're just finding ways to get him involved. Currently, he's actually in the top 20 running back scoring in PPR leagues, and he's had double-digit points every week. I would sit Austin Eckler, though, in standard leagues at this point. Unless something were to happen to Melvin Gordon, he were to go down, then you could look at starting him. So Carlos Hyde in this one, I would start as a low-end running back, too. Got 5 touchdowns on the year, and he's averaging over 20 carries per game, which is great. Half the battle on fantasy, just find a guy that's going to get a majority of the touches. He's doing that, but he's got 3.5 yards per carry, and his value also drops in PPR scoring. He's got a higher value in standard, so I would sit Chubb in this one. I know many thought that he was going to break out at that huge week before. I think he had 2-3 carries. Now, he will have better days ahead. I do think he's going to have an opportunity to eventually become the starter there. But until we see more definitive proof, until we can see increased carries, you need to sit him. Then there's Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson, they're actually trying to increase his role. He's got great hands. I'm surprised they're not using him more in the passing game. But even though his role has increased, it hasn't increased enough where you can trust him. You need to sit him. As far as wide receivers go, the Chargers give up the 5th most points to wide receivers. So looking at Jarvis Landry there, he's had double-digit targets of 4 of 5 games. Now, the production's lacking a little bit, but clearly he's the team's best wide receiver. I would start as a wide receiver 2 in PPRs or a wide receiver 3 in standards. Then you have Callaway. They said they're going to decrease his role, and they did exactly that. Now, the benefactor of that decreased role has been Higgins. Fortunately, Higgins has a sprained MCL. He's out for 2 weeks, putting Callaway back into that conversation. With that said, he's still a rookie. He's got a long way to go. Sit him as a wide receiver 4. He's just out of somebody outside of trusting him at this point. Yeah, Mike Williams. Mike Williams is a very talented young wide receiver, but he has inconsistent targets, and then Tyrell Williams, solid play, is a guy that means that you need to sit Mike Williams. You have Keenan Allen, start as a wide receiver 1. Now, he's been quiet, but last year he had a pretty quiet year until after Week 9. After Week 9, he just exploded. In fact, he carried a lot of people into the playoffs, into the championships, and so start Keenan Allen. As far as tight ends in this game go, you got Gates. Now, the Browns allow a lot of points to tight ends, so I guess you would call him maybe a deep sleeper. But you look at his age, his production, it just simply isn't there. There's too many weapons that Rivers can use. I'd rather stay away from Antonio Gates. Who I do like in here for a tight end, though, is David Njoku. So Baker Mayfield comes in for Tyrod Taylor. The game that he came in and relieved him, immediately David Njoku had 2 catches for 36 yards. Followed it up next game with 5 catches, 52 yards. Last game he had 6 catches, 69 yards. This is a guy that we're going to continue to see him produce. A lot of experts felt like he was the most talented tight end coming out of the draft last year, but he was a little bit of a project that needed to develop. Well, it looks like that development is happening. It's starting to come together for him. Start David Njoku. I would sit both kickers. I would sit the Browns defense. You could start the Chargers as a low-end play. They're not a great option. Quite honestly, I don't trust the Chargers fully until Joey Bosa gets back in that lineup there. So. The Raiders and the Seahawks, Russell Wilson. Well, Russell Wilson hasn't broke over 20 yards passing in 3 games. That team is now committed to running the ball a lot. We're actually doing really well. With that said, Russell Wilson is still good. He's got 10 touchdown passes on the year to only 3 interceptions. I think he's been hampered by a lack of weapons there. So to me, he's outside the top 10 this week as far as starting goes. Now, if you look at the Raiders, they've been exposed by every quarterback that has faced them except for Case Keenum. With that said, Case Keenum just not very good. So I think Russell Wilson can have a decent game there, but not a great play. This is not a guy that you can trust to be a top 5 pick currently. And you got Derek Carr. So I think Seattle lost Earl Thomas. They lost so many weapons in the offseason. That defense should be terrible there. It looks like a tempting play, but if you consider this, Derek Carr had that huge game against the Browns, 434 yards passing and 4 TDs. If you take that out of there, he's averaging less than a touchdown per game, and he's got 3 TD passes to only 6 interceptions. Not very good there. And in spite of all that Seattle has lost on defense, they're actually giving up the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. And so even though it may seem like a tempting matchup, I would stay away from Derek Carr. Marshawn Lynch is having a nice year right now, 4.3 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. The concern I have for Marshawn Lynch's value in this game is if they fall behind early, they start throwing the ball a lot. He's not used a lot in passing situations. But I think you need to start Marshawn Lynch as a running back 2 in this one facing Seattle. Now, Seattle gives up the 11 fewest points to running backs, but I think there's extra incentive for him to run hard in this one playing his old team. I like him in this game as a running back 2. Now you look at Jalen Richard. Jalen Richard in this one. He's a major benefactor when they fall behind. He's got 24 catches in 5 games. Now, when Washington comes back, Richard's role almost gets cut in half. They're very similar backs, similar skill sets. But in the meantime, with Washington out, Richard is worth a flex start in PPR leagues. You got Chris Carson playing the Raiders to get the 10th most points to running backs. Now, this is the 3rd week in a row that a Seattle running back has had over 100 yards rushing. Now, twice it was Chris Carson. Last week he looked great. He looked to be the better back at this point. I would start Carson as a running back 2, low-end play. I'd love to say he'd be a solid running back 2, but he's simply not with Mike Davis now getting carries there. Now, he should lead Seattle in carries, but like we said, Davis is going to get some of those carries, and he's going to get some of the goal line carries. So I like Carson as a low-end running back 2. As far as Mike Davis goes, him and Carson really devalue each other. Mike Davis is another guy that looks really good there. He's running hard, but he's a running back 3. You could start him as a flex play in big leagues. Now we got Amari Cooper. What to think about this guy? He's had 2 really good games. He's had 3 horrible games. He's starting to feel a lot like Hilton did last year. Last year, T.Y. Hilton had 4 games where he had like over 150 yards per game he averaged, and then the rest of the other games he averaged like 30 yards per game. He was terrible. He got to the point that even though he had the potential of a huge game, owners simply couldn't trust starting him because they were getting just burned by this guy. I am afraid that Amari Cooper is starting to become that at this point. In 3 games, he's averaged 12 yards per game and only 3 targets per game. But then the other 2 games, he's averaged 122 yards and 11 targets. So I think that he's a risky play, but I think he still needs to start him as a wide receiver 3. He's got too much upside to not consider him, but he's no longer what we call a top-tier wide receiver at this point until things get better in that offense. Now you got Jordy Nelson, 3 weeks in a row, he's had a touchdown, but with Carr struggling, he's only seen 5.6 targets, and his best yardage game was only 48, so he's a wide receiver 4 for me. Then you have Matavius Bryant. Matavius Bryant has probably the most upside, the most talent of any of these wide receivers there. He's only averaging 3 catches and 50 yards per game and no touchdowns, so I would sit him. Then you have Doug Baldwin in the game here. He looked good last game. He played. He was on the field. He didn't have any setbacks there. A lot of people felt like his 1 catch was an indication he was still hurt, but he didn't look like it on the field. I think part of that was playing the Rams' defense there and the way the game scheme went and how they ran the ball. But with ongoing knee issues, I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3 against Oakland, allowing the 12th most points to wide receivers. Then you have Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett, 4 touchdowns in 5 games. His yards have been fine. Last game, he had the season's best 98 yards. His targets are lower, but you need to start him as a wide receiver 3. Tight ends in this game got Jared Cook. Seattle's actually tough on tight ends, allowing the 7th fewest points to tight ends. But he's having a very nice season. You need to start him, but he's outside of the top 10 because of his matchup. Sit Nick Vannett. I would start Janikowski. I would sit the Oakland kicker. I would sit Oakland's defense. They're only actually getting like 1.2 sacks per season. It's not good. And I would sit Seattle's. If you have to play a defense now, you could play Seattle's in a pinch. They might be all right. Let's look at the Bears and the Dolphins. Start with quarterback Sarah Tannehill. I would sit him. He struggled last 2 weeks badly. Now he's playing a Bears defense that is really, really good out there. This Bears defense is top 5 in the NFL. Now I want to get to Mitch Trubisky. Okay, so here goes the insanity. Please hear me when I say this. So he's coming off a huge game where he had 6 touchdown passes. Okay, so that was a 1-game matchup anomaly, playing a terrible Tampa Bay defense. We talked about how bad that defense was. Now they're playing Miami. That allows the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. Before the Tampa Bay blowout, Mitch Trubisky was averaging only 197 yards passing, and during those 3 games, he only had 2 touchdown passes to 3 interceptions. Now, Mitch might be figuring things out. That offense might start to hit, but until we see a pattern, you just can't trust him. don't get too excited by his last game. We need to see at least another game to know where they're trending. Once again, were those numbers put up simply because he played Tampa Bay? As far as running backs go, I look at Drake. Drake looked good last game, ran well, was using the passing game. A lot of what we saw last game is what we expected going into this year. I think he's going to rebound, and I think his final 10 games are going to be great. Now, I say final 10, not 11. And the reason why I say that is that he's playing the Bears, who allow the least points to running backs. I think we need another game from Drake to see that we can trust his volume. Even if he does get good volume in this game, I'd expect he's still going to struggle quite a bit. That Bears defense is really good. So he's a guy that I'd advise sitting, unless you're in a very, very big league or you have no other options. As far as Frank Gore, he's been steady, he's trustworthy, but age 35, he's not great anymore. And the matchup against the Bears mean you need to sit him. I think Jordan Howard. So Jordan Howard's playing Miami. Miami allows the 6th most points to running backs, but his 3.2 yards per carry is concerning. Now, he has had a lot of carries. It just simply hasn't turned out to be good production. So what's going on with Jordan Howard? Well, before the season started, a lot of people had said they felt like Jordan Howard was not a good fit for Nagy's offense. Now, it's too early to give up on this guy. He's got a great matchup this week. So I think you need to start him in standards. And I would start him with some concern or some hesitation. Start him as an RB2-3, depending on your league size. Now look at Tree Cohen. So I think moving forward, Tree Cohen's going to have a significant value, and he's going to have a significant role in PPR leagues. I think his role is going to look very much like Austin Eckler, James White, or Chris Thompson type of role there. He's going to see 8 to 10 carries a game with 6 or 7 targets. So I would start him as a running back 3 or flex in PPR leagues. If you look at Cohen, his role I think is going to grow because I just simply think he's better in open space. He's quicker, he's more elusive, and he's a better option in the passing game with Nagy's offense than Jordan Howard. So I think you're going to see a little bit of shift there. As far as wide receivers go, you look at the Miami wide receivers. You got Stills, Amendola, Grant, Parker. It doesn't matter. Sit them all. One, the Bears are good. Those receivers are not good, and Tannehill's struggling. As far as Allen Robinson in this one, he's their #1 wide receiver. He's seen a lot of targets, and he looks like he's fully recovered from that injury that he had. I think right now really what's holding him back is Mitch Trubisky, but you need to start him as a wide receiver 3. Now, it sounds like Anthony Miller might be back in this game. Now, Gabriel's stats last game were what I call situational perfect storm, where everything fell into place. Miller was out, high-scoring game. I would sit both Miller and Gabriel in this one. As far as tight ends go, I would sit Burton. I would sit Miami tight ends. I would start Parquet. I would sit Miami's kickers. I would start Chicago and Miami's defense in this one. I think Miami's defense is actually a good start in this one. Viking versus the Cards. My Vikes got back in the winning track. That was nice to see. Hopefully they can put 2 in a row here, and they should be able to play at home versus the Cardinals. I would sit Rosen in this one. He's on the road versus a Vikings defense that can be deadly, and they appeared to kind of get things back on track last game. So I think they're going to go home hungry, and they're going to give him a lot of trouble there. I would start Kirk Cousins. He's been worth every penny the Vikings have paid for him. He's averaging 337 passing yards per game. He's got a career best quarterback rating of 105. Now, this game may be a lower scoring game, but I still think you need to start Kirk Cousins. As far as running backs go, you got David Johnson. Plays Minnesota, allowing the 9th fewest points to running backs, but David Johnson's a good volume play. This guy's got 37 touchdowns and 38 career games. He just finds the end zone all the time. So you need to start him. With that said, he's not a tier 1 running back this season simply because of that offense there. As far as Dalvin Cooks go, he's playing the Cardinals. The Cardinals allow the most points to running backs. Now, I suspect that he won't be healthy and ready to play, but if he does, once again, you have to watch injury report come like Friday and Saturday, especially Sunday morning. But if he does play, because of his matchup, because of his talent, I think you need to start him. But I would start him as a low-end running back 2 or flex. As far as Latavius Murray goes, 5th consecutive year, his production has dropped. His yards per carry are low at 3.5. And the Vikings are beginning to see it now. We can see in the games that they're starting to spell him for other running backs there. So I would sit him. As far as wide receivers go, Adam Thielen, start as wide receiver 1. It doesn't seem to matter who he lines up with. It doesn't matter who the cornerback is. In 5 games, he's been over 100 yards. He's a currently he's a #1 wide receiver in fantasy football. He's ahead of names like Hopkins, Brown, Beckham, some of those guys out there. So he's one of the top guys out there. So I would definitely play him. And you have Stephon Diggs now. Stephon Diggs, I'm going to say start as a wide receiver 3. Normally I'd say he's a wide receiver 2, but the Cardinals give the 4th fewest points to wide receivers, and this game might be lower scoring, so I'm going to devalue him from wide receiver 3 to from wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3. I would sit Fitzgerald. He's facing Xavier Rhodes, which is a very good corner. He's banged up, got some injuries, and the quarterback play is not great. If you had to start a wide receiver for the Cardinals, it would be Christian Kirk. Right now, for me, he lands as a wide receiver 3/4, depending upon what league size you're in. If you're in very deep leagues, you could start him. He's their best wide receiver after Xavier Rhodes. sometimes guys can get open, wide receivers can be somewhat productive. He's been drawing comparisons to Odell Beckham. In this game, I think they're going to be playing catch up quite a bit. As far as tight ends go, I would sit Ricky Seals-Jones. I would start Rudolph. Now, Rudolph is overrated, but he's consistent. As far as kickers go, I start Bailey. I would sit the Cardinals kicker. I would start Minnesota's defense, and I would sit the Cardinals defense. You got the Colts versus the Jets. Andrew Luck right now is throwing 49 times per game. They have no running game and a bad defense. Even without T.Y. Hilton last game, he produced. You need to start him. As far as Samuel Darnold goes, he had a nice game versus Denver, but he struggled. But he has struggled. Now he's playing an Indy defense that's not good, and they're beat up with injuries. The question comes down to is, can you trust a rookie quarterback? For me, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that chance. Yes, you could get yourself a nice steal, late pickup. He might go off for 300 yards, but you could easily go for 150 and a pick, so I would just sit him. As far as running backs go, look at Isaiah Crowell. Played in the Colts, who give up the 13th most points to running back. Started as a running back too. I think he's a better play in standard leagues. You got to lower his value in PPRs. Now he exploded last week for 15 carries, 219 yards, and a TD. Right now in the year, he's got 5 TDs. He's on pace for 1,248 yards, and currently his yards per carry is 6.8. Obviously, that's going to drop. But in the preseason, we talked this guy up quite a bit. In fact, in our notes in the preseason, I'm looking at him here. We said that this year he's going to break over 1,000 yards. He's going to become a solid starting running back there, and I think that we're seeing that come out now. Now, he will be at times inconsistent because of a rookie quarterback's play. Paul in this game. Paul had another good week there. I would start Paul as a running back 3 or flex in PPR leagues. You get Nyheim Hines. His skill set is just a better fit for Andrew Luck in that passing offense. Plus, Indianapolis defense is bad, meaning they're often playing from behind, need to throw the ball a lot. Then you add to that the ineptitude of all the other Colts backs there. I think that he's going to continue seeing an expanded role there. Against the Patriots, he had 15 carries, 45 yards. That's not great, but then none of the running backs there have been. But what I do like about this guy, he's very active in the passing game. 7 catches, 45 yards. Before that, he had 9 catches, 63 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So you can start him as a flex play in PPRs. I would sit all other backs for the Colts. As far as wide receivers go, you got T.Y. Hilton. I would start as a wide receiver too. If he's healthy, you're going to have to watch injury report, see come Friday, Saturday how he's at. We'll give you guys updates on the site, or you can ask us questions. He's playing the Jets, who give the 10th most points to wide receivers. So then you get Chester Rogers. I would only play Chester Rogers if Hilton is out. If Hilton plays, I would sit Rogers. I also sit Grant in this one, and the reason why is because I think that Hilton's going to get a lot of those carries that they like to use their tight ends and Hines. So without Hilton, or with Hilton in there, I think they lose a lot of value. Now it appears like Doyle, tight end there, is close to returning. If he does, it really hurts both him and Eric Ebron. It becomes a tight end by committee, which we all hate that. You look at the 2 tight ends right now. Eric Ebron is looking really good. 5 touchdowns in 5 games. He's seeing more targets. He's productive. A lot of people forget he was a former first-round pick, so he's got the pedigree there. If Doyle misses this game again, start Eric Ebron. But you have to lower your expectation playing the Jets, who allow these second fewest points to tight ends. If Doyle ends up playing, I would want to see. I want to prove a game for Doyle. I wouldn't start him yet. I just couldn't trust him, and I would lower Ebron outside the top 10. I would sit the Jets tight ends, like I said. Kickers, start Vinatieri, and Myers is actually worth a start in this one too if you needed somebody there. It's better to sit the Jets defense, although you could play him as a lower end play. I would start the Colts, who are versus the Jets, allowing the 8th most points to defenses. With that said, you have to watch. The Colts have some key defenders that are in concussion protocol that are banged up. If some of those key defenders sit out, then I probably wouldn't start the Colts. But if they're healthy, if they get cleared and they can play, the Colts are a nice sleeper defense to play this week. Let's look at the Panthers and the Redskins. Cam Newton. So they're playing the Redskins to give up the 11th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, he's not great through the year, but he's relevant in fantasy terms because of his legs. On the year, he's got 3 rushing touchdowns, averaging 41 rushing yards per game. I would start Cam Newton. Then Alex Smith is playing the Panthers to give the 17th fewest points to quarterbacks. Many people were big on him last season going into this year, and I really don't know why. Besides last year, he's a good quarterback, but he's more of a game manager. Then he goes from Kansas City, who had very good weapons there, to Washington, who's not nearly as good of weapons there, and so I'm not really sure why people are so big on him. And I think another thing that's going to hurt him there is that Chris Thompson left last game with a rib injury. It could affect his play. If Chris Thompson's out, that's a major blow to Alex Smith in that offense, because really Chris Thompson is the best wide receiver at this point. Of course, best running back used as a receiver. I want to clarify that because some of you out there are going to say he's not a wide receiver, he's a running back. I think you know what I mean. As far as running backs go, you got Adrian Peterson. So he's had 2 good games and 2 bad games. Now he faces the Panthers, who have the 14th fewest points allowed to running backs. Now, he said he separated his shoulder last game. He came out and said that he's fine. He's going to be good to go, but it's good to monitor that as the week goes on. Now, before entering this year, Adrian Peterson was not known to be a good running back in terms of being involved in the passing game. Right now, he's got 7 catches for 137 yards for the year. That'd be his most receiving yards he's ever had in a career if he continues that pace. I would say you need to start him as a low-end running back 2 or running back 3 in smaller leagues. As far as Chris Thompson goes, monitor his rib injury through the week. If he plays, you need to start him as a PPR or as a running back 2 flex. Once again, start him in PPR leagues as a running back 2 or flex. Currently, he has 26 catches in 4 games. I would put him on pace for 104 catches for the year. You can't ignore that. Now, if he's out, and depending upon what happens with Adrian Peterson, the guy that you're going to want to look to there is Bibbs. He's the one to watch. So follow or monitor the injury report there. Now, Bibbs is a solid pass catching back, and so I think he only has value if Chris Thompson is out, and he only has value in PPR leagues. Christian McCaffrey goes start as a wide receiver 1. He's a wide receiver 1 stud in PPR leagues. He's a wide receiver 2 in standard leagues. Let's look at wide receivers. Well, the Panthers gave up the 8th most points to wide receiver. Now, Crowder had a great matchup last week. He had his best numbers for the year. He had 4 catches, 55 yards. So a great matchup. He has best game. Pretty unproductive numbers there. He started the season slow last year, but for me, until he picks things up, I just won't trust him. In fact, to be honest with you, that targets get spread out a lot. You look at you look at Crowder, Richardson, Reed, Davis, Thompson. They spread the targets out so much there that it's really hard to trust any of those Washington wide receivers. So currently, none of them can be trusted. I would sit all of them. Now, the Redskins give up the 9th fewest points to wide receivers. DJ Moore is starting to show some life there. He's starting to get more involved in that offense, but the volume and targets have just not been constant enough to warrant starting, so I would sit him. And then Devin Funchess, it's better to sit this week as a wide receiver 4 against a Washington defense that is tough to wide receivers. As far as tight ends go, Jordan Reed had 3 decent games last game. He had an off game. I think he'll rebound. I would start as a tight end. I'm ranked around 8 to 10. I would say Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis only has value if Jordan Reed is out because of injuries, which with his injury history, that could certainly happen. But as of now, he seems healthy. Now, Greg Olsen, speaking Monday, Greg Olsen confirmed that he's expected to return week 6, but said he expects to require surgery at the end of the season. So last season, the same thing. Hurt his foot, came back, re-injured it. I think he needs a prove-it game this year before we can trust him. Last year, he came back, owners jumped all over him, and then for like 2-3 games there, they were very disappointed in his production. So if he does come back, don't immediately plug him in your lineup and trust that he's going to be the Greg Olsen of old. As far as kickers go, I would start Gano, and Hopkins is a decent play in this one. I would start the Panthers defense, although I will say this, Alex Smith typically doesn't give up a lot of turnovers, and I would sit Washington's defense. Bills and the Texans. So sit down. Texans give up a lot of points to quarterbacks. That is true. That defense isn't very good. He has no wide receivers there. He's only got 2 touchdown passes in 5 games. He's only averaging 149 passing yards per game. You need to sit Allen. Deshaun Watson has a chest injury. Monitor that. Although he did finish the game with a chest injury last game, most likely it's ribs. They didn't come out and say if it was yet or confirm that. He played with it, and he played fine. It looks like he'll be good to go for this game. Now, with no significant running game there, the running backs have struggled for the Texans. He has to throw the ball all the time. He's had 4 consecutive games with over 300 yards passing. Start him as a 10 to 12 quarterback play. As far as running backs go, you got LaShawn McCoy. See a lot of carries. He played decent last game. I think they're going to give him a lot of touches, trying to take pressure off the rookie quarterback. I think it'll run heavy, so I would start McCoy as a running back too. Texans are kind of middle of the road in terms of points allowed to running backs. I would sit Ivory unless McCoy misses time. As far as Blue or Miller goes, both have been ineffective. I would sit Blue. Miller's going to return this week. At least it appears like he's ready to come back. The head coach had made that statement. He's a volume play, running back 3. Flex in very deep leagues. He simply hasn't produced. The door is really open for Foreman next week to return and to win that job. I would sit all Buffalo wide receivers. Start DeAndre Hopkins. He's matchup proof. The guy's a stud. As far as Kiki Coates, he's had 2 nice games in a row. Part of his production was due to Fuller's health. Had hamstring injuries, and so I think that he wasn't on the field quite as much. Didn't see nearly as much. Kiki Coates can be started as a wide receiver 3 until Fuller is healthy. Once Fuller gets healthy, we need to see exactly his role and usage and what that's going to look like, because we just don't know how it's going to shake out, because Will Fuller, when he's been healthy, has been an extremely good wide receiver. Will Fuller, another one, once again, I said he's got hamstring issues who hindered him. Kiki is going to start to steal some targets, but exactly how many we simply don't know. I would probably sit Will Fuller in this one. We need to see his hamstring get 100%, and we need to see exactly what that's going to look like between him and Kiki Coates. So for me, Will Fuller is a wide receiver 4 in this one. I would sit all tight ends in this. Now, I know Griffin had a good game last game, but it's the first one of the year. It's the first time he's had more than 2 targets and 2 catches, I should say 2 catches in a game, and so I would sit him. Both the kickers are good starts in this one. I would start Houston, Buffalo's defense if you're desperate. Once again, the defense I would go to is I would start Houston. You could start the Bills defense if you're desperate. The strength of that team actually is their defense there, although I don't think that the Bills are a great play. Some of that depends upon the health of Watson in this one. So. The Rams and the Broncos. Let's start with the quarterback play there. Jared Goff, I would start him. I like this guy a lot. The one thing that is concerning is that Brandon Cooks and Kupp are in concussion protocol. Now, the coach said Monday that he thinks that they're tracking well, that they've had no side effects from the concussion and looks good to return. But if they sit out, obviously that devalues Goff there. But he's still got enough weapons around him that I think that he needs to play. Now, that Denver defense is just not what it used to be a few years back. I think a lot of us thought they drafted Chubb in the defensive line. They're going to bring a ton of pressure and return to the way they were a few years ago, but it just simply isn't happening at this point. I would say Case Keenum. Playing the Rams will give the 6 fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, his last game, he was good, but before they did 3 games where he had no touchdowns and a pick each game. As far as running backs go, I don't need to tell you to start Todd Gurley, do I? If I need to tell you that, come on, man, don't play fantasy. As far as running backs for Denver go, Lindsey, start as a running back 2 in leagues over 12 teams or start as a flex play. He's on the field more for Denver, and Denver is in passing situations, which I expect in this game they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit, playing from behind, which means that Lindsey should see an increased role. He's got better hands than Freeman, and he's in a lot of those passing packages when he's out there in the field. Now the Rams give up the 10th fewest points to running backs, so we'll look at Freeman. I would sit him in PPR leagues. He is an RB3 in standards over 12 teams. As far as wide receivers go, you got Woods, Kupp, and Cook. Obviously, if either Cook or Kupp sit, I would start Woods as a wide receiver 2. You're going to have to monitor their concussion protocol this week. Now, if those guys play, I would say that Woods becomes a wide receiver 3. Now, both Kupp and Cook, if they do play, I would say that they're wide receiver 3. The one problem that I have with those guys, they're all very good. Both 3 guys there, they spread the targets out quite a bit there. It's hard to trust, although so far they've been able to maintain their production. You look at Denver. Denver is actually tough against wide receivers, but so was Minnesota. And we look at the Rams did to the Minnesota defense. It didn't really matter. So I think that, once again, if Kupp or Cook sit, Woods would become a wide receiver 2. If they play, then all 3 of those wide receivers would be considered what I would say a wide receiver 3. As far as Sutton goes, Sutton here is getting an expanded role, but not enough yet to trust. Sanders is a wide receiver 3 start. He's probably the safest player of the 3 wide receivers, although he's not a great option. Then you got Demaryius Thomas. He had a late touchdown that kind of saved his game. But after week 2, he's only been getting 6 targets per game. He's a wide receiver 4. You need to sit if you can afford to do that. I would sit all tight ends. I think if Kupp and Cooks is out, Josh Brown's going to see a lot of action. I know some people think that's going to go to the tight end Everett. I don't know if that's going to happen. Everett's maybe a deep sleeper. Denver actually allows a lot of points to tight ends, but they just simply don't look to the tight ends a whole lot there where I feel like I could trust him. I would sit both kickers. I would start the Rams defense, and I would sit Denver's defense in this one. Jags and the Cowboys. Sit Dak Prescott. He's got no good wide receivers. The Jags are good. Sit. Don't even tell you why. Just simply sit Dak Prescott. Blake Bortles. We said it last season. We said it again. He's so unpredictable. Now, he's had 3 good fantasy football games, but last game he was brutal. Threw 4 interceptions. It was garbage time that really saved his game. He had a garbage time late touchdown there and yardage, but 4 interceptions. Now he's playing Dallas. Dallas defense is actually solid. I would sit Blake Bortles in this one. Then you got Yeldon. Fournette's going to expected to miss another game. Yeldon's a solid running back 2 flex play. He's also great in daily fantasy, which, by the way, we have a daily fantasy video. We'll give you some more insight in that if you play that. Ezekiel Elliott started as a running back 1. The Jags are going to make it tough on him, but he's going to see heavy action. I expect him to get 20 carries, 6 or 7 targets in the passing game. He's by far their best weapon, so they're going to use him heavily going forward. As far as wide receivers go, I would sit all wide receivers. Dallas, no one's really has emerged there. Now, if you look at the Jaguars wide receivers, they actually have some talent there, but they had a great matchup against Kansas City. But it took some late plays, some garbage time stats to give those wide receivers decent days. You got Cole, Moncrief, Westbrook. They're just so inconsistent from week to week. It's hard to trust any one of them. And for that reasons, they're playing Dallas too. That I had mentioned is actually a pretty decent defense there. And so I just have a hard time trusting any of these wide receivers in this game. For me, those Jags wide receivers all kind of sit that wide receiver 4 bubble. As far as tight ends go, I would start Jeff Swaim, as they say. He's starting to get an increased role in that offense there. He's probably the best wide receiver. I would sit Niles Paul. Oscar Jenkins is now injured. Looks like he's out for the year. He might be able to come back late in the season. We'll see. I would start Lambeau. He should rebound this week. He's a decent play, not a great play, and I would sit the Dallas kickers. Start the Jags defense, and you can actually start the Dallas defense. They're a low-end defense play this week. The Titans versus the Ravens. So Marcus Mariota, the Ravens defense is good, and Marcus Mariota's had one good game this year. Otherwise, he's been bad all year. You need to sit Marcus in this one. Joe Flacco plays the Titans. Will give the 7th fewest points to quarterbacks. Sit. I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair, and so I wouldn't trust him. As far as running backs go, Collins, until he earns coach's trust and gets more goal line carries, I would downgrade him to running back 3. And as far as Allen goes, start as a flex in PPR leagues. As far as Henry goes, you need to sit him. He's got a 3.4 yards per carry for the year. His best yardage total has been 57 yards. He hasn't had a touchdown yet. He's not using passing situation. We actually predicted this in a number of preseason videos. Stay away from him. And as far as Deion Lewis goes, until the Titans get things back on track, I would only start him as a flex or deep play in PPR leagues. Wide receiver in this one, you got Brown and Crabtree. I think I see an old school defensive battle there, and so for me, those guys are wide receiver 4s. Davis this week is a wide receiver 4, and then Taylor I would sit against the Ravens. I would sit all tight ends here. I would start both kickers, and I would start both defenses in this game. As far as the Chiefs and Patriots go, this is going to be a fun game to watch this week. If there's a game that you want to sit down and watch, this would be the one to do. I would start both quarterbacks in what should be a high-scoring game. Now, Pat Mahomes struggled against the Jags a bit there. He had 2 interceptions and 0 touchdowns. He did redeem himself with a rushing touchdown and get over 300 yards passing. That's his 4th game in a row. Now Brady looks great. He's got Edelman back. Gordon's getting more involved. He's got all of his weapons there. Brady's a great play. As far as running backs go, you got James White. I would start as a running back 2 and flex as PPRs and as standards as a flex play only. Once again, James White, though, in PPRs is a stud at this point. So Sony Michel goes, he's a running back 2 start every week. In some weeks, I think he's actually a running back 1. In fact, I think this is one of those weeks where I think Sony Michel is a running back 1. He's playing Kansas City because of the second most points to running backs. He's in a great situation. Typically, I try to stay away from New England running backs. They spread the ball around quite a bit. They use so many different players and looks and things like that. But because of injuries and ineffective play, I think going forward, this guy's going to get 15 to 20 carries every game. I think you can trust him. As far as Kareem Hunt goes, start as a running back 1. As far as wide receivers go, Julian Edelman, start as a wide receiver 2 in PPR, as a wide receiver 3 in standards if you're in leagues that are 12 teams or larger. Josh Gordon, the volume's not there. It makes him a little bit of a scary play. Now, he did increase the percentage of plays that he was on the field, and he did double his targets. Now, last week we said he was a wide receiver 4. We cautioned against starting him. This week I'm going to say he moves into the wide receiver 3 conversation. I think he'll get more targets. He'll be on the field for more plays, so I think you can start him this week. And then Sammy Watkins, start as wide receiver 3. Returned from injury, had a nice game last game. Start both tight ends in this one. Obviously, they're both very good, Gronk and Kelsey. Start both kickers, and I would sit both defenses in this one. Now we get to our final game. We got the 49ers versus the Packers. Bradford actually has been not a bad quarterback. You could start him if you're desperate. I'm hoping there's better options out there for you, but he's been okay. He's been serviceable anyways. And then Aaron Rodgers is a great start against a bad San Francisco pass defense. You need to play him there. As far as running backs go, you look at Aaron Jones, start as a running back 2. The coach said he does great things with the ball, but he went on to say that he likes Williams. Williams is very good in pass protection. So as long as he continues to love seeing Jamal Williams on the field there, it's going to devalue Jones a little bit. It's going to keep his ceiling lower. As far as Morris goes, of course, Matt Breida is going to be out for a couple games there with that injury that he had. And so I think for Morris, I would start in standard leagues as a running back 2. I would sit in PPRs. As far as Devontae Adams goes, starts as wide receiver 1. He's beginning to heat up. Early in the year, he had some tough matchups, kept his yardage totals lower, but I think that's going to change. Now Geronimo Allison should be back in this one. Start as a wide receiver 2 if Cobb is out. If Cobb plays, I would still start him, but do as a wide receiver 3. As far as Cobbs goes, I think Randall Cobb, we need to see a game for him to come back and see his usage. He got in the doghouse a little bit. He had some drops, some fumbles, some missed assignments there. And Allison had been playing really well, so I think we need him to come back and play, see how he does. As far as wide receivers for San Francisco goes, I would sit all of them. If you have to play one, it'd be Pierre Garçon. He's going to get the most of the targets there. Goodwin was really good, but really his value is attached to Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think that if you had to play one there, it could be Garçon as a wide receiver 3 in large leagues. The one thing to consider San Francisco is I imagine they're probably going to be playing from behind. I would start Kittle and Graham as far as tight ends go there. I would sit both kickers. I would sit San Francisco and start the Packers in this one. So that's kind of some thoughts for you guys to consider there. If you have any questions, feel free to put them at the bottom. Thanks for joining us. God bless.